Let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, our beloved Guru Deva, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we humbly bow before you all. Great Masters, help us to realize now and always that you are the source of all abundance in our lives, not just monetary, but wisdom, love, joy. Everything comes from thee. Help us to realize that and to create a flow of energy, that our hearts are always open to thee, in readiness to receive all that you have to give us. Om, peace. Amen. Good afternoon, everyone. Last Friday, I gave a talk during my Satsang called The Source of All Abundance. And I talked, for most of that talk, about the practice of tithing. And I realized when the talk was over that I hadn't said a lot of what I wanted to say. But I also felt myself being a little uncomfortable. I asked a friend of mine, did that talk sound preachy? And she said, no, not at all. She said, but it was a call to action. And I realized, and I said this last week too, but I'll say it again for those of you who didn't have the opportunity to watch that talk. Money is such a sensitive issue, at least in the Western world. I think all over the world, really, because I've traveled enough to know. It's a particular delusion, and it really has a strong hold on us. Yogananda told us that the three greatest delusions, he said sex, wine, and money. But by wine, he really meant all mind and mood altering drugs. But money was in there. And it's just simply true. Somehow, in a way that we relate to it that even is different than sex or wine, it's sort of quintessentially material. I mean, of course it is. It buys us everything material that we need. And it just slips in there that if we don't develop a conscious relationship to it, it will have a way of controlling us. It's so understandable to me, but we actually live with this constant, at least undercurrent, if not expansive belief, that money brings us security. Money brings us safety. Money gets us all the things that we want in the world. We don't say this as devotees, but that will make us happy. We don't say that, but there is a way that many of us live in terms of that delusion, and it is powerful. I just, this moment, realized that today is a day where we honor, we meaning those of us at Ananda, honor Rajarsi Janakananda, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's most highly evolved male disciple. He was frequently known to be in states of samadhi. He also happened to be an extremely wealthy businessman. He was very successful at everything he did, almost for sure because from the moment he came in, he was being supported by Master and, just infused with Master's inspiration, although he didn't meet Master as a small child. Still, he was very bright, very energetic, enthusiastic about the work he did. He had a lot of great spiritual qualities from the beginning. But then he met Master and was immediately devoted to him and became a great disciple. But he worked in the world. He had many businesses, and he made a lot of money. And he supported the work that Master came to do in a very big way on the material plane. But Master even said to him one day when they were, I don't remember the specifics of it, nor does it matter right now, but he, in essence, said to him, Rajasi, don't forget where your power comes from. Power is just, we could insert the word money. We could insert many words there, but don't forget where your power comes from. And just like a little boy, he looked, he said, I won't, Master. I know it comes from you. And just today happens to be the day where we celebrate that enthusiasm in staying conscious all day that what we have in this world comes from God and that we will find ways to give it back. We don't actually do it around money. We do it more on this particular day around service. And both Master and Swamiji were very clear, by the way, I didn't say this last week, that service or seva is not a substitute for tithing or donating money. Swamiji said, seva spiritualizes our attitude towards work. Tithing spiritualizes our attitude towards money. Very different. So often people will say, well, I serve a lot. Doesn't that, quote unquote, count? We hear that a lot. And both Swamiji and Master would say no. They did say no. Because what we're trying to do is to spiritualize our relationship to money. This is why tithing is so important. I want to expound on that in a minute. But I want to say something right out loud so I don't have to wonder tonight about the feeling behind this talk. Otherwise, you're all going to get to listen to Tithing Part 3. We don't want to have to do that. There's nothing about guilt here. There's nothing about shoulds here in this talk or when we speak about money. And because it's such a sensitive topic, it can easily feel that way. But I really want to put that to rest right from the get-go. If anybody's feeling that, then it's worth looking inside and asking ourselves, why do I get that feeling whenever I hear a talk about money? Because I feel very clear it's not why I want to speak about tithing. I want to speak about tithing because, like all forms of energy, if we don't spiritualize it, remember what Swami said, tithing is a way to spiritualize our attitude towards money. If we don't develop a conscious relationship with money, if we live unconsciously, which, as I said last Friday, I had a very easy time with money all of this life, but it was an unconscious relationship. It wasn't until I was here for many years at Ananda that I brought that consciousness into the relationship. Anything that we're not conscious of, that we're not holding up to our own higher consciousness, cannot be transformed. And if it can't be transformed, it's not working for us in a way to help us grow spiritually. And if it's not working for us on the spiritual path, it's holding us back. There's no doubt about it. So we can't tuck the whole notion of money. We like to do that with money. We like to do it about death and dying. We can't do that, because in any of those places that we stay unconscious, we're draining energy. We're turning our energy, our focus, our effort, our will away from this path that we're on, to remember who we are, to dissolve all delusion that we are separate from anything or anyone, never mind from the divine. Today, as I was thinking about what I wanted to say today, what concepts I would want to cover, I was thinking about how often, this could sound very silly, but stay with me for a minute here, how often Swamiji spoke right out loud about this, the nature of duality, the condition that we find ourselves in when we take a human life. He talked about it in just about every talk, in everything he's written. He's got to start with how we got to be where we are. That is primarily into that place where we feel separate from our superconscious state. And because it has to do with everything. It's the whole nature of the spiritual path. It's just turning around and taking that journey back to our superconscious existence. So he talks about it all the time. And he speaks about it constantly in his book, Money Magnetism, where he also speaks about tithing. But in every talk that he gave, every place he ever wrote anything about tithing, he speaks about the fact that a conscious relationship with money and what it really means in this life will help us dissolve the delusion that we are separate from the divine. Now, that's a hard concept to follow because money feels so material. It feels like grabbing a chair or touching our skin. We pick up a $20 bill. We go out, we hand them a credit card. We buy things. We type in information on a computer and things arrive in our homes. It's just quintessentially material. It's easier to look at it in a way than it is with our beliefs or our thoughts or other things that we hold apart from our divine nature. So it's very tricky. And I think this is, to some degree, part of why Master would say that it's a major delusion, because it's so easy to see it as apart from the journey we're on. And in fact, it rests right at the core of this journey. When Swamiji lists the things, the gains that we can make with tithing. Tithing means, by the way, just let me not presume that all of you either know or heard this little talk last week. Tithing actually means tenth. And as I said last week, it starts very early in the Bible, and where Moses, literally coming out of Egypt, says to the Jews, the first thing we're going to do is give 10% of everything we grow, acquire, back to God. So it's an ancient practice. It's not a practice that Master came up with or Swami came up with, or it's a practice that that's part of Sanatana Dharma, eternal truths, is that we would give that percent. Now, as I said last week, and this is very important, 10% feels like a lot when you're first thinking about this. It would be very easy to think, my God, how could I give 10% of everything I make to give it back to God? I deeply appreciate that sort of like, are you kidding me? I also appreciate watching people over years on a spiritual path till they've turned around and they're thinking, how could I not give 10%? Or why would I only give 10%? We quit thinking of it as mine. But that's part of why this talk is good. Just gets us thinking about money, and then way beyond thinking, but consciously going after developing a different relationship to it. Swamiji talks about it in interesting ways. He says there are many benefits to tithing, which can mean we expand that concept. I didn't finish the thought I just had. If you can't manage the idea of 10%, fair enough. Again, there's no shoulds, there's no guilt. But ask yourself, could you imagine, or better yet, ask God, sit and meditate on this, deciding on some percentage so that you're not always bringing it back into your head with your fears, with your notions about money. If we can say, I'll give 1% of everything I make back. I will give it to the source of my inspiration. And as Swamiji says, since we can't really go and just hand it right to God, we give it to the work that's being done in His name in this world, whatever that is for you. But you choose a percent and then you stick to it. You can make it 0.5%. Make it whatever you feel comfortable with to begin with, so you're not having to obsess about it and drive yourself crazy, but then stick to it for a while. Once you do that and that flow is in place, not to be questioned, the fear is going to come up. You just, like we do in meditation, go away, fear. I'm not letting you in right now. This is what I'm doing. And we keep doing it. Swamiji says, of all the benefits, first and foremost, it allows us to develop a friendship with God. Imagine that. That's what he says. Now, he goes on to list many other things, and I wrote this list right out of, I believe it's out of Money Magnetism, though it may not be, but wherever it is, it's a list that he's come up with. But he talks first about developing the relationship with God, and then he talks about the joy that it can spark in your heart, the deep sense of joy. He talks about this when we tithe, when we make it a conscious act, a conscious devotional offering to God. This is why many people don't like to put it on a credit card. They want to write the check or give it in cash, whatever you need to do to make it conscious. If you want to stop and pray over it, if you want to pray over your credit card statement every month, that's fine too. Just make it conscious. But Swamiji says, he says, tithing will give you greater faith in God as the source of your abundance. Now, I'm just going to actually read this list, and then I want to tell you what I find to be so uplifting about it, so right at the core of our spiritual effort and how we find true joy. Well, Swamiji says that. First he says it'll give you greater faith in God as the source of abundance. Then he says you will feel more joy as you begin to feel how God will take care of your finances for you and will take care of you on a material plane, because we open that door. We invite him in, like we say every Sunday. Open your heart, and he will enter and take charge of your life. And that's what we begin to feel when we give anything to God. We feel it when we give him our love. We feel it when we offer a thought or a prayer. We feel very close with him. Why would it be any different when we give him this abundance, which is already him and his to begin with? He says, the act of tithing will help you affirm that you are a part of something so much bigger than yourself. Meaning, it helps us as we move back to remembering we are not this little life, we are not this body, we are not simply a woman or a doctor or a teacher or any of the small ways that we identify ourselves. We are a part of something, so much bigger than that. And it's such a joy as we begin to expand. Then he says, tithing helps us purify our heart and feel God's joy as a tangible experience. Isn't that beautiful? Just the imagination, the imagining of feeling God's joy as a tangible experience. And then he says that tithing is a true and tried method of reversing the contractive experience that a human life is. And lastly, on that list, regular tithing will give you the spiritual power to attract what you really need in life. I've read that list now several times. I read it last week before I gave the first part of this talk. And then I was reading it again today. And I thought, again, if we can make that transition, all of which Swamiji's telling us, tithing, the act of giving, of really developing a sense, the feeling of generosity, of spirit and in spirit and in truth, in a way. Generosity of spirit, but actual generosity. If we tithe, that we are the very act of tithing. Again, remember I said we hold money as very material. When we begin to let go of that and move on our spiritual path with it by offering it up to God, we begin to loosen the hold that it has on us in the material plane, and we begin to experience it for what it really is, which is just another manifestation of God's energy into this world. Remember, before the material world, it's the energetic world and the causal world and super consciousness. Everything in the world has its origin in super consciousness. And as we reverse our behavior with money, our thinking about money, the way we hold on to money, as we begin to offer it, whatever it is, if it's a nickel or a dime or a rupee or a dollar, whatever it is, that act of taking it and consciously giving it back to God really helps us remember everything is a manifestation of spiritual energy. Everything. And that is the road that takes us back to our beloved. That's what happens. Everything we're doing in this life, we're moving from the material to the spiritual. So how we're doing it with money is exactly what Swamiji said, through generosity, through friendship, by showing God our love, by feeling joy in our hearts, the joy of giving. We all know the joy of giving. Can you imagine if every month or every paycheck or however you would want to do it, and again, whatever it is, forget the amount. Try and dive deep in the experience. That's what we're talking about, because the experience is one of creating that bridge from this material world to our divine home in God. It's frightening for us, and I understand that. We love to watch our bank accounts grow. We watch people go through what they go through when they retire and they have to start spending them down, or somebody they know needs money. We always think when we give money that we're giving something away. And it carries with it the connotation of having less for ourselves. Let's try very hard to think about this concept of tithing, and when we do it, to consciously hold that we're offering some part of ourselves into something larger, more expansive. That's why I love that point that Swamiji made. Of course he would make it. It helps us remember that we are a part of something bigger. That little money can't save you from anything. When we really get down to it, and we're really in a crisis, and we really need help and support and love and strength and courage, those are not the things money can buy you. Those are the things that God himself brings to us. So let's not think that that's true everywhere except in our money. And remember what I said at the beginning of this talk. No guilt, no shoulds. If we can hear this talk and hear everything Swamiji and Master, and every other master for that matter, have written and said about this material world and the ties that money has on us, the hold that it has on us. If we can say, look at that, it's just another delusion. It was never true. Like everything else, when I'm giving with a sense of abundance, when I'm connecting to true abundance, abundance has to come to us. It has to. As soon as we enter that spiritual realm of everything expansive, expansiveness comes to us. We're not giving away anything, friends. We are offering our little bit of energy, that little bit of income, our little selves into the infinite source of all that is.